Hello, I am joined by Juan Francisco Villa today, and I'm just going to be asking you a few questions. Thank you for joining me. I just wanted to start by having you tell me a little bit about your upbringing and what kind of the journey you took to becoming an actor and a playwright.
I grew up in the Lower East Side of New York, over Manhattan, a Lower East Side, as it's been known to be called. And I believe that we're all storytellers, and when you're young, um, people get mythologized, whether it's your friends or people who are older than you, family, all those things. So for me, that's I might have not been a writer when I was young, but I definitely was ingesting stories and listening to stories. Gossip is the best storytelling tactic, and our ears perk up when we hear gossip. So in that sense, I was just I loved hearing stories. So I was always that kid who was asking questions, was laughing. I was not the type of kid that put down people. Like, so if your mama jokes, that was not my thing. But I'm that person that's laughing the entire time, and also like, oh damn, that's messed up. But when I finally was able to write was in high school. I went to La Salle Academy in New York City over at Second and Second. It's a Jesuits all boys school, and an English teacher. It's your classic story of just the English teacher is the one who's has a writing assignment. I did it at that time. I think I was kind of messing up in school just because a bunch of family stuff was going on. And so I went from like straight A's to, I don't know, C's, D's, easily could be F's, but the teachers were being very kind. And I couldn't even tell you what I wrote, but the English teacher, Mr. Donahue, he was like, I want to talk to you after class. And of course it's like, whoa. And I'm like worried and I'm scared. And he starts saying, he's like, I think you're a writer. And which was just, I couldn't fathom what that even meant. Unfortunately, my point of view of the Latinx community was that we're not educated, we're not writers, we're not artists. I wasn't introduced to that stuff, so there was no place that it reflected back to me of that's a path that I could go on. And so I did what any teenager would do, and I ignored him, and I didn't do any writing. I was just like, he's crazy. I don't want to get picked on more. Why am I going to explore writing? And jump way ahead to my mid-20s when I was living in Chicago, and I was taking a Meisner class, which is just an acting technique, and you have to create. They were teaching it as you have to create backstory, and so I started writing sort of this backstory for some characters, and it was easy for me, and I loved it, and I really got a lot out of doing that. And then I fell in love, and then I had my heart broken hardcore, and that made me write poems. And so that was really the first time that this thing was awakened, where I needed to express myself, and I needed to put it on the page, and then I needed to say it out loud in front of people, which is just the craziest thing anyone can do. I mean, the top fear for people is usually public speaking. So we're nut jobs for doing stuff like that, and I think we're courageous. All of you, anybody who does that, I'm like, that's so courageous, regardless of how it goes. That's hard to do. And so I did my writing, and I did my poems at slam poetry, and then I did well, cheered, and then I was booed. And then I was like, I'm never going to do this again. And then jumped to when I was 32, I finished a different Meisner program, a 2-year one. And my stepfather had passed away suddenly. And I was just surprised. We were all just taken aback. And my mom shared some stories about men passing away before the age of 33, starting with her father, my grandfather. He was murdered at 32 by his best friend. And then it was my uncles. And it just went down the line that anybody, especially anybody who was living in the apartment that my mom still has at 169 Allen Street in New York City, that the men are going to die. So then I was 32 at that time, and I was freaking out. Even though I didn't, I'm a recovering Catholic, as I say. I was altar boy. I did all that stuff, and I was like, I don't believe in God. I think the church is bullshit, organized religion. But yet I was afraid that I was going to pay for my family's sins. So I had a lot of insomnia, a lot of anxiety. And I just was like, well, if I'm going to go, I want to leave my story. I want to leave my legacy, which is my stories. And so I just started writing, journaling. Morning pages is a big tactic, a big tool. And it became the heart of my solo play called Empanada for a Dream. And that was really the first time that I was like, oh, this is how this feels. So it's all nonfiction, it's autobiographical. And then it led to a production of it that had a great response that was done around the country. And then now I've transitioned to writing for TV and film. I just completed I finished my final semester of my MFA in TV film writing. And so that's the big transition for me. I've been mainly an actor. That's how I've made my living, is doing that. But I want to be part of the storytelling part, where the stories that I want to see out there. I want to try at least. Doesn't mean anyone's going to give me a job or hire me, but I want to try at least. So that's sort of how I've gotten to this place.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And I also like share with you the idea that pursuing art is a very courageous endeavor. And so that's really amazing. You're talking about kind of how everyone hears stories and gossip and experiences stories throughout their life. And so I was curious, during our semester, we've been trying to kind of find a canon of works that really inspire people. And so I was wondering if there were any particular works you read during your childhood or during your time as you began writing that really inspired you or gave you characters that you felt represented you.
Yeah, I didn't mention this because there was another English teacher, Mr. Kelleher, who is now a big poet within the poetry community, but he was directing plays, and he was that English teacher that you see in what is it called, Dead Poet Society or anything like that, where he came in, he had long hair, ponytail, and he was like, we're going to read this, this, and this. And it was Ham on Rye, Catcher in the Rye. And the one that got me, and I can't remember the order that he introduced it, was Down These Mean Streets by P.D. Thomas. He's a founder or co-founder of the New York Poets Cafe. And that just like blew my mind. I just read it again a couple of months ago, and it's still just it's just potent. It is powerful. And why? Because it was a New York Puerto Rican writer. So that was my introduction to an educated Latino, Latinx, Latin writer, and I was like, oh, I didn't know we could do this. And also his flow, the text was my vernacular. Like regardless of how I sound now, I grew up in New York, and it's just, that is like, hip hop is definitely something that is a big part of me. And I was just blown away by it. And I just like engulfed it, just like ingested it and devoured it. And it just just invigorated me in a way that I thought was possible. And of course, that teacher, Mr. Kelleher, got in a lot of trouble for all these things. He encouraged us to challenge the status quo. And, it's an all boys high school. So we were just maniacs. I don't know how anyone learns anything during puberty. I commend to anyone who survives it. I also know why they're traumatizing. But we just became this pack of students, and that stayed with me. So that, to me, Now, of course, anyone who's going to maybe like be interested in reading it, there's strong language in there that is, it does not hold back. And, but I still think it's one of the first writings that explored the Afro Latinx experience. And it is like, that is at the core of it. And it is beautiful and heartbreaking and infuriating. So that's the one that I would say off the bat. And then when I went to college, I went to Lemoyne College in Syracuse, New York. So I went from 95% Black, brown students to a college that is 95% white. And that was like a huge culture shift for me. And that was where I was introduced to playwrights like Cándido Tirado, Carmen Rivera, Jose Rivera. I was like, who is this? And the white professors were like, you don't know Jose Rivera? You should know who he is. And I'm like, I didn't even know the public theater was blocks away from where I grew up. I had no idea there was this thing right there. And another book is I think it's called Freeman or Freeman for All, Free Theater. It's about Joseph Papp, another fantastic book. But anyways, so those playwrights, that writer, those were the beginning of it. And then in college also, through Latinx organization called El Progreso, they what's his name? Oh my god, why am I drawing blank? He's also a co-founder of the Eureka Poets Cafe, Miguel Piñero. Then he was also someone else that I was introduced to, and Willie Perdomo. And I was just like, what? I just was getting my mind blown. But it wasn't enough for me to do a full dive into that, because I was deathly afraid of moving back to New York. I wanted us to be as far away as possible from there. So those off the bat were the writers that I think people should be familiar with, should read, watch anything that's theirs. You can find a lot of interviews online. And then I just got introduced to more writers: Migdalia Cruz, Luis Alfaro, Terrell McRaney is not Latinx, but the Brother Sisters trilogy is a phenomenal trilogy. It is a beautiful, beautiful body of work that just blew me away. It's very poetic, so I think that just speaks to me. So I would highly recommend to anyone. It's a play that put him on the map. He got Genius, he got all this. He's a writer of Moonlight. He had a play that is called Color Boys. I can't remember, Under the Moonlight, and then Barry Jenkins adapted it into the film Moonlight. But it's Terrell's writing, and that's what was done at Steppenwolf and at the Public Theater in New York. And so like Sterling Brown was in that. Brian T. Henry was in that, who was in Atlanta. There's somebody else, and I can't remember. There's like some big prominent artists that were in there that are now, part of the mainstream on TV and film. So, but those are off the bat that I would throw those things in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were kind of touching on earlier, I mean, writing is a really scary thing for a lot of people to share their story. And so I'm just curious what got you over that hump of being like, I'm willing to do this and share it with people rather than just get your thoughts out for yourself.
Well, it's not a what got me over the hump. I'm still battle that. Like, that does not go away, man. Like, I try to tell people, it's not, like when people talk about someone being courageous and someone being brave, and the way I was fed it was, it's the absence of fear. And it's not, man, like that. It's about, you should have the fear and you're still doing that thing. That's courage. That's bravery. If it's an absence of fear, like, then what? It's not a big deal. There's nothing at risk because you're not afraid. But there should be something that just makes your heart feel like it's going to stop. Like if you have an Apple Watch, it'll tell you breathe for 1 minute. Like, oh, I'm at that point. And so it hasn't stopped. That I when I was doing my solo play, autobiographical, I didn't change names or anything. I was definitely at a point where I was like, I don't know if I should be doing this when I'm about to go to performing. And I asked myself 3 questions, and the questions were, if the my friends see this and they just are like, oh, this is bad, or oh, that's messed up about Juan. We don't want to be friends with him. That's one. If my colleagues, coworkers in the theater community were like, oh, this is bad, we don't ever want to work with him again. That's two. And then the third one being if my family sees it and they go, we're going to disown him. If I just imagined, all right, if all three happen where they all don't want anything to do with me and I lose all these people, is this still important for me to share? And it was like, yeah, I just have to. It almost didn't feel like a choice. And then somehow just accepting that the right people, even if it's bad or doesn't work well, the right people will be supportive or will be present or will still be a part of my life. If it's like one or two people, you know what, then great. And so I ask myself that whenever I'm writing something. And that helps me just go, all right, then it's that important, because or else I get stuck in this. I'm an anxious person, and naturally, and I think Catholicism has a big part of that. My mom's voice of just Dios te va a castigar is just beating down on me, even though I don't want to listen to it. But hence being in therapy for a couple of decades now is just like it helps me keep pushing forward. But the anxiety is just always going to be there, and I just have to. What helps me is usually when I do the writing. When I do the writing, that's when I feel better. I know that, and yet I still sometimes avoid writing. Like that's just my relationship right now, and I'm still figuring out that process. So that's how I would answer that question off the bat. It's going to always be there. That fear, just start writing, and it'll help.
See if I can move somewhere with a little less noise. There's a fire drill going on in the apartment complex.
What are you doing in there, Carlos?
Let me see if I can.
Is that your home? Is that your dorm or your home?
This is my apartment actually here in LA. It's a big apartment complex. No worries.
Is the alarm at your place or it's somewhere in
the whole building, the whole complex? There's the fire department out here on the street, so clearly something.
Oh, damn. Okay.
All right, so you were talking a little bit about solo performance, and we kind of talked a little bit about it, and I was curious if you could talk about some of the challenges that are different for solo performance than for other types of playwriting.
Well, it's my ass up there. So, I can blame the playwright, but it's still me. I can blame the actor, it's still me. And then also it's just there's no real filter. I'm writing my second solo play, Finding Pancho, and it's about looking for my father in Colombia. And I'm having like a real hard time because there's just no way for me to hide. And when I wrote Empanada for a Dream, my first one, that I was just kind of in a, I don't care what happens. And I just had this like energy that's really intense. And also I drank during that time. I'm about to be 8 years sober on Thursday. And so to write or create while sober has been a challenge. And there are these glorified artists that are out there that are all about, they drank, they were wasted, they write their best work when they're drinking up till 4 a.m., all this stuff. And it's like, it's a romanticized thing that I try to tell people, you don't have to do it that way. You can, but to have that be a lifestyle, I don't know. Good luck to the people around you if they can put up with you during that. So with the solo performance, it's just me. It's just my words, and the challenge is to stay up there and continue sharing something scary about yourself, something that's maybe not a good side about you, and that's usually the biggest challenge for me. Or if I say something about someone and they're in the audience. The first workshop performance of Empanada for a Dream, my family went, and I did not want them to go to the first one because I wanted to figure things out before they came. And But my mom, man, my entire family, they were so proud of me. They were like, we want to go. We want to see this comedy called Empanada for a Dream. And it's like, it's not a comedy, man. Like, is it funny? Yes. But this is a drama. Like, I'm talking about my, being Colombian. Both my parents are from Colombia. My mom from Pereira, my father from Bogota. And we're the only Colombians in a Caribbean dominated neighborhood. Everybody was Dominican or Puerto Rican, or there were some people who were from the Black community. And it was about that, and being picked on for being Colombian, being like coffee beans, doing Al Pacino impersonations, just being, fucking Scarface, just like, I hate fucking Colombians, say hello to my little friend, like stuff like that. And then I discover when I'm 11, when my first uncle was murdered, that my uncles were kingpins, and they were smuggling in cocaine, and they were selling it, and then they were killing people. They were murdering people, including family of my friends in my neighborhood. And then my uncles got murdered one at a time. And, my family didn't talk about it. And that's when I discovered that. That's when my relationship with my family split, because I'm like, we're the worst stereotype that's out there. And I think it caused a lot of pain in my family. And I'm telling these personal stories. And if my mom is there, something that I discovered while writing it, probably not even until I was performing it, was, oh yeah, that's my mom and those are my uncles. But I just completely just ignored that those are her siblings. Those are her brothers. Those are the people that she took care of. She was like a mother figure to them, and they were murdered. And I never got out of my head. I was just so self-involved at that point, which is okay. But because I eventually recognized that, and we had a good talk. So it was scary to share stuff like that, but it led to, just because I'm pretty self-aware, it led to a discovery, and it helped deepen my relationship with my mom. So it was scary. That's the hard part about being a solo performer. But if you know you're coming from a place of love, you can then work through that, and then hopefully it leads to healing. It might not happen immediately. It might take years. But once people hear you out, because they're not going to stop you. I mean, that would have been interesting if they just interrupted the show and were like, that's not true. That's not true. But that didn't happen. So I was able to talk. And I was such a quiet person that it was the first time I was able to just talk. Whereas, like, I got 75 minutes, my time, you paid for a ticket, so you're going to sit and listen. It was sort of like an intervention for my family. So that's, to me, that's the hard part, is putting your neck out there. And me, by that point, I was a type of actor who knew if I was bullshitting. So I just can't stand myself when I'm bullshitting, and it's my writing. So I have to be ruthless as an actor, telling the playwright, cut this, cut this, cut that, cut that. This is corny. This is cheesy. Oh, this is too intense. This is too rough. I can show without telling. I should tell without like, and I had a director, Alex Levy, who was immensely helpful, and I trusted him. And that's a hard part also, being a solo performer, is finding a director that you can trust, because it's you up there, and you have to have someone that will call you on your bullshit, but also be supportive and tender and nurturing whenever those moments call for it.
Yeah, and I'm kind of interested just to talk to you about something you were saying a little bit earlier about this idea that like pain and kind of misery is really glorified. And there's kind of this saying that like the best works come from when people are in their worst places. And for me, at least, that's an idea that I find myself pushing back against, just because it encourages the wrong type of behavior. You know what I mean? And so I'm curious what your opinion on that is from your own experiences. Like, do you really think that the best work really comes from these places of misery because it has more interest and drama and stuff, or do you think it's kind of possible to find that even outside of those types of situations?
Well, like you said, it does it create more interest and drama from pain? Does that work? Does it lead to that? And I took a writing workshop at a dramatist in New York with this playwright, Erin Courtney. She ran the Brooklyn College MFA writing program, and now is running the Northwestern MFA writing program. And she said something that had stayed with me. This was only like 5 years ago. And she said, there's just as much drama and compassion as there is in conflict. And it just kind of like, it just blew my mind. And actually, because I mentioned the playwright Terrell McRaney, just especially in Moonlight, that entire film, what was I think revolutionary with love, was I think I had been trained by stories I'd ingested and exposed to, that if someone is homophobic, if someone is not accepting of themselves, violence is going to be just inflicted on each other. And then so I was waiting the entire film for this thing to happen where it's like, oh, it's going to get ugly, it's going to be intense, they're going to bop bop bop. And there was one eruption, but it wasn't the way I was expecting. But even up to the end, I was expecting it. I was there in that last scene, man, and I'm watching it. I'm like, oh, it's now. It's going to happen now. And it did not. And I was a mess with tears and just like joy. And then I was like, wow, I almost to the point that I'm wanting violence. I realized, oh, and then the way the country was being run from 2016 to 2020, it was like, whoa, this is how it can get. And so, is there a place where you can create where there's pain? Yes. Are some great works created in that way? Yes. Do you have to do it that way? No. Do you have to make yourself be in pain to create? I think that's the most dangerous part, is where you are self-sabotaging to get to a place where can just say things and write things and have characters say things. And I think that's the part that is most dangerous for me, that I tell people, just be very careful, be in therapy, because then that's the problem. I mean, we're going to have pain in our lives. There's no way around it. Like I said, I got my heart broken. People have died in my family. That meant a lot to me. I've caused pain in plenty of people, but it wasn't like a conscious thing, but I had to be honest with how things went. And then, okay, how can I rectify that? How can I make amends? How can I apologize? But to make yourself do that, that's the part that I'm most concerned about. And you do not have to. You don't have to. But there are people who avoid exploring painful sides of humanity. And then there's the fine line, because then that's when people are like, oh, that's bullshit. They're being so sweet. That's not the way the world works. It's like, yeah, I see. I don't know if that's the language I would use, but yes, I think the person is avoiding something. Because without exploring certain sides, you're not going to really have the characters in a moment where, do I choose violence or do I choose compassion? Like, and that's dramatic. That is a beautiful conflict. But if everything's going well for people and everyone's treating each other really nicely, it's like, well, all right, I don't know if that's going to hold for a full story, but those things are out there. I mean, Ted Lasso is a great example of, some people hate that stuff. If I was younger, I probably would have been like, stupid. But I've lived long enough that I just watch it and I'm like, oh, that's really, again, I'm expecting this dark, intense side to come out, but no, he actually is choosing to be positive, compassionate, supportive, and that's hard to do in life, period. There's a great film by it might be Mike Nichols. It's called Happy Go Lucky. It's a British film. And the protagonist is happy-go-lucky. And it's like, and then watching her go through meeting people who don't look at the world the way she does and trying to bring her down. And it's really fascinating to watch. And I was like, wow, I found myself rooting for her, because you don't want someone to take that joy away. It's a tangent from what you asked, but
yeah, no, it's a really good advice. And talking about some of those kind of experiences that everybody goes through throughout their life, I was curious if you might want to highlight some of the obstacles that you've faced in your career, whether they were personal, whether they were from other people, whether they were, I don't know, things in regards to writer's block or stuff like that. Like, what are some obstacles that you found yourself facing?
Well, going from LES to Syracuse, and then I lived in Chicago for a long time, which is, I think, is more of my artistic home, is staying true to myself. I discovered many parts of myself throughout that time, but I also found myself in a lot of white spaces, and I was a part of companies that where everyone, if not by far the majority, are white skinned, whether they're white Latinos or white Anglo. And there's the mental colonization that Black and brown folks can have, but especially within the Latinx community, colorism is a big deal. And I think people are afraid of, I was afraid of rocking the boat, and just wanting to be accepted by the big theaters, or white theaters, and thereby not being aware of the blind spots that we had, and then to sort of undo that. Not everyone wants to, because then everyone thinks that they're a bad person and are just as bad as whatever example people want to use. And it's like, no, 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 no. Just be aware of it and go from there. But being a person who was introducing that question did not go over well. And to me, that was a big obstacle. And it still is. Like, I'm still processing that. And because I didn't want to be known as being difficult. And just in general, Latinx folks don't want to be known as difficult, because there are plenty of stories where people lose their shit. But no one ever thought to ask, why are people on a short fuse? Why are they so angry? Why are they in pain? They just go, oh, they're difficult, and done. And then once you hear those stories enough times, and that you never hear of that artist any longer, you don't want to be that next person. And that's a way to oppress yourself. And so that to me was a big challenge, and a lot of relationships changed really in the last 6 years for me. And it broke my heart, because the term that people like to use, that we're family. And to me, I'm like, don't say that. That's a flag, man. Are we maybe a community, colleagues? But only you can be honest with yourself of if they're a colleague, they're a friend, family, community. Like, understanding that difference to me was the most helpful thing. But it was also difficult for me to accept, to call someone that I did a show for 3 months a colleague, because you share things with each other. You share so much of yourself, your vulnerability on stage, in rehearsal, backstage, and to be able to distinguish the difference. I think most of the people that have had long careers, healthy careers, are the ones that can distinguish the difference, and they can separate it, or they make time for themselves, or they have boundaries. Brene Brown is a fantastic person to listen to. Any of her podcast interviews, her books, and she talks about there is no compassion without boundaries. If you don't have boundaries, you're gonna just be giving everything away, and then the day comes where something just gets you, and you can feel very hurt, and you either react where you crumble, and then you hide, and you have shame, or you, instead of feeling sad, you just lash out, and then my temper has come out, and I've had to just accept that. And the best thing to do is just to be like, boundary, or I got to step away and reevaluate. Any relationship you have in your life, family, friends, romantic, business, theater, you can renegotiate at any point. You really can have that conversation if you've changed, if they've changed, and talk about it. And the thing is that's scary, though, is to maybe come to a place where you go, oh, we can't be friends any longer. I got to not see my family for a few holidays. That's hard, because it's become so much a part of our identity. I took a break from theater before the pandemic, because I had reached a point where I was turning into that older actor who is bitter. And I realized I had to just step away. And then the pandemic happened, which helps. But I had a lot of friends and colleagues who have had a hard time, because theater can be a way to be part of our identity, and it can validate us. And that can be a trap, because then we think we're doing well in life. And it's like, no. You gotta be able to separate the two. And also theater can be a place in rehearsals, especially, where you can talk about life. And now you don't have access to people to talk to. And then that's gone. And you're dealing with yourself. And that is a hard thing, because you get to express certain things about yourself in a play that you can't do in life, because you won't, but you get an access, you get an outlet. And when that's taken away, you have to deal with yourself. And that is the hardest thing to do. So that was a big obstacle for me. And I'm glad I took a break from doing full productions of theater for a while, so that I can start separating, finding my own identity, as opposed to it being theater is my identity. So that's just because the theater is not for profit doesn't mean that it's all hunky-dory, because theater will replace you in a heartbeat for a bigger name or for a cheaper option. And I think the sooner artists can just know their value and their worth, the better.
Wow. On that note, I wanted you to talk a little bit about your feelings of Latinx representation in media, both now, since you said you're dealing with some TV and film writing, and within the theater space.
I mean, it's a big one, and I'm glad there are some conversations being had. I'm glad people are being called out. You know, Lin-Manuel Miranda has really for 10 years has been criticized about his representation, especially the lack of Afro Latinx representation. And so I wasn't surprised with the film. And at the same time, I'm glad he's taking responsibility and making some choices, but though him being called out had to happen. West Side Story being called out has to happen. And then the conversation can move forward. But if people deny the conversation because we should just be grateful, that's not how this country was built. It just wasn't. You have to challenge everything. Like, things change, and I think the younger generation will reflect back to us things that we've maybe taken for granted or have ignored. And I think people get scared, because the whole conversation of, I worked hard for this, or you don't know what I went through, you have to just pull up by your bootstraps and just deal with it. And it's like, no. Things, the salary of a union theater actor in the 1980s or 90s has barely shifted. Here we are in 2021. And yet the rent and the cost of living has exploded. It's just not the same. You're not going to get coffee for 50 cents the way Lanford Wilson does oh my God, I forgot the play already. But anyways, but it's like, you can't get coffee for 50 cents. You can't. Like, it's a different world where you can just hang out with someone for a few hours. And so it's different. It's just different. And so within the Latinx community, I'm hoping to sort of to add to the diaspora. And the biggest challenge within the Latinx diaspora, which is why film just can't figure out how to get all of us out there, is that we're so different. Puerto Rican, Colombian, Cuban, Panamanian, Mexican, Salvadoran, like, all different. If you try to sum us up in one, it's just not going to work. And I see a lot of stuff out there where people try to use the Latinx term a lot, and I get why, and I think that's great, even Latin. But the more specific each person is that's how we get to learn of each other. Because even within our own community, within the diaspora, we have assumptions about each other. And that we're only I think we just got to be as specific as we can. I think the Black community has done a better job of Afro Latinx representation than the Latinx community. And that is heartbreaking for me. And I just have to when these conversations come up with folks, I just got to be like, yeah, it's true. There's no way to deny it. I see more artists that are Black within Black films, Black TV shows, or just films than us. We're not doing our part. People are starting to, but we're way behind. And so even with my personal story that I shared about growing up and Empanada for a Dream, I'm also hyper aware of how we're presented with being kingpins, cocaine, all that stuff. it is a part of my story, but I'm hoping that my specificity, because even in my solo show, people say, oh, it felt like it was about family as opposed to it being about cocaine. And that's the difference between, I think, what I bring to the table than what other films or TV shows, they just focus on that part. And it's like, no, there's more to us than that. And so I'm hoping I can add to it. I hope people see something there. And, the thing is that I will say to anyone is create your own content. Create your own stories. Content, I know, is a word that can sound blasphemous to certain people. And then there's a generation that is like, yeah, that's the word. And it's not, there's no issue about it. So tell your own stories, produce your own stuff, like Instagram and any social media. Like, you can create so much. TikTok, obviously, being a huge one. I look at TikTok, older people, my generation or older, are just like, so they're, holding their nose up high at it. And I look at TikTok as that stuff that me and my friends would joke about, but we would like say it and joke it out and act it out and do it and laugh. And TikTok gives you the tools to actually make it happen. And I mean, that's amazing to me. And I just commend anyone. It can take hours to create 1 30-second video. And I just am blown away by that. And as much as I'm not able to do that, I am always going to applaud and support anyone who challenges that. And that's the way we've been taking in information. And that's just a reality that we got to accept. So I hope more people continue to challenge and continue to, especially the LGBTQIA plus community, like that. If I look at going to high school in the 90s to now, high school students, like high school shows, coming of age, it's just a world of difference. And there's still more room to go. So I'm excited about where we're going, because I've never seen this many stories that just have given us a beautiful range and authentic. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them. And I just want to continue supporting those.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about that this semester, about kind of the idea that, yeah, like only having one story that has to represent everybody's experiences is the problem. It's the fact that we're not highlighting all these varied stories and everyone's kind of putting their chips on this one story that really is the issue, rather than having kind of a wide diaspora of stories. And like you said, this one term being used to include all these people, when really they can be so different. You know what I mean? And so we definitely talked a lot about that.
And now I would say and also this thing of, just because of West Side Story, accents in the UK, Ireland, Australia, there is such a, from the people that have made it, because there are these broad statements that are made that all British actors are amazing, all Irish actors are amazing. It's like, no, the ones that make it are the cream of the crop, so they're amazing, but it's not all of them, because I feel like we put ourselves down as Americans. But they do, like, for the most part, really strong accent work. And I wish the same respect was given to a Puerto Rican accent, a New Yorker accent. Both are different. Colombian American, like, and then even within that, there are all these dialects that are different. So that's a whole lot. And I just wish people would pay more attention to that. And it's hard to do. And thereby, when we see like a film like West Side Story, where they have accents because they just immigrated, it can be hard. At this point, it can be triggering in a lot of ways, where it's like, kind of cringeworthy. And it's like, get people who actually, if the people can't do it well, then get the people who have it naturally. But that takes so much more work, which means money, and people don't want to. And one of the things I've learned in creating my own stuff is that you want to work with the people that you get along with and that you have a shorthand with, and you don't want to put the extra time. And that's just at a small level. And I hope people make time, start earlier. And it's hard. And I just want people to start building that habit. The sooner, the better. Because keep a file of people, what they do, what they naturally do, what they're really good at, what they want to explore. And I hope for those people who maybe wrote stories or acted in things that that maybe are supporting a stereotype or a profile in a certain way. I hope that when they get a seat at the table, they then go, all right, enough of that. I'm now going to open the door or create a bigger pie for people. Like, that's what I'm hoping people do. And I hope they don't become part of the machine and start doing the same thing or supporting the same stuff. It's like, I get why people have to make certain choices. And I think I see a shift happening, really younger people, where I think they're challenging it to a point because money talks and people are seeing it, and then they can start opening doors and start telling more nuanced stories. I see it happening, and I see the gap of why it's taking the Latinx community so long, because there are certain actors that are older than us or my age or older who just, they were trying to look out for themselves, and that's a scarcity mentality. And I don't think they ever can admit that to themselves. Not that I've seen. And these are people that are heroes to me, and heroes, heroesses. Like, I am here because of them, but I am aware. I can criticize my heroes and go, yeah, but these are your actions. These are your interviews, and it hurts. But I cannot deny that you played a big role in my career. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, of course. To shift a little bit back to you and a little bit more about your career, I'm curious what's your favorite project that you've ever worked on yourself?
That I've acted in, or
It could be acted in or written. I mean, I know it can be difficult to compare different experiences, but just a personal in your head, if you think of your favorite, whether it was maybe favorite doesn't necessarily mean your best or most exciting. I mean, it can mean a lot of different things, but I'm just curious if you had to really say this is the project that was my favorite, what would it be?
I think it would be I mean, I loved that I got to act in the public theater. I did a production of Oedipus El Rey, which is an adaptation of Oedipus by Luis Alfaro. And I was thrilled that I got to, I've worked on all three of his Greek plays. Mojada, which is an adaptation of oh my God, what's her name? That she kills her kids. Medea. It's an adaptation of that. And then there's Electricidad, an adaptation of Electro, which I did at the Goodman, understudied at the Goodman. And then Oedipus. So I was excited to just be back home at that level. And so it was also exciting because I also was like, oh, okay, like here I am in this theater I've always wanted to work in. It's just a theater. How other people perceive it is the difference. So that was exciting for me to do, and then to come to that realization. I understudied Stephen Ellie Girgis' play, which is I was introduced to his work at Steppenwolf, and then I got to go on and perform. I was another one where I was like, that's why I moved to Chicago. And then I got on stage to perform. I hadn't had any rehearsal, nothing. I went on just with all this conversation about understudies now. And I walk on stage just like, I mean, I gave myself 5 years to get on that stage, and I was there on year 2. And then again, oh, it's just a theater. It was exciting, the buildup, and then it's like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like, it's just a theater. It's just how people perceive it. That was exciting, because I also learned something. And then and then what was exciting as a sort of artist was I did The Gentleman Caller by Philip Dawkins. It's a two-hander, a story of William Inge and Tennessee Williams. It's about their story as friendships, and he explores about their stories that they were lovers also. Which I didn't know William Inge was gay, but he was a big closeted writer, and I didn't know that. And Tennessee Williams was the opposite; he was flamboyant. And so I played Tennessee Williams, and that was an experience that just nearly broke me. But I loved his language, his writing, how he looked at life. I was sober, so then also exploring someone who's drinking to that point, someone who drank for pain. You know, he has a great, Tennessee Williams is great. It's called Streetcar
for Desire?
Yeah, Streetcar Desire, but it's a Streetcar from Success, Streetcar of Success, it's called. He wrote this letter, and it's a beautiful letter. It's just because of what we were talking about creating in pain, where he was at a nice hotel coming from the success of a glass menagerie, and it was a beautiful hotel, and he destroyed the hotel because he didn't know how to like create from a place of comfort. And it's a good thing to read for people to go, whoa, is that either makes someone go, oh great, I have to destroy things and be in pain, or it makes you go, do I really have to work that way? So it's up to you. But in the play that Philip wrote, it was great. But we also, I'm Colombian American, and then the actor who played William Minge is Daniel K. Isaac, who's on Billions, and he's Korean American. And we got picked on by critics, and they just could not get past us playing the roles of white theater icons. And that was only a few years ago. And it was really like eye-opening of like, oh, wow, like they really don't want their icons, fucked with. And it hurt, but then also like I knew what was happening inside, and I loved it. I loved it so much. I didn't know if I was going to fail each performance or what, and it was an exciting experience. And then as a writer, I have this pilot adapted from a play of mine called Don Chipotle, but the pilot is called the Lacona Legacy, and it's a fantasy family drama, superheroes, and I loved it. I've co-written it with my buddy Joe Mignoso, who's been on Chicago Fire since season 1. We were part of Teatro Vista in Chicago, so we're best friends. And I've loved creating that because it's the kind of thing I wished I would have seen. And we made it to some high percentage on this thing called Coverfly. And we'll see. We've gotten accepted into some stuff, and we're hoping more things come out of it. But just writing it has been a lot of fun and exciting. And I do believe we have something awesome, and I'm hoping something comes out of it. But even if nothing comes out of it, it's like, we have this thing that meant a lot to me to create and continue to work on. So, I sort of a bunch of different things for different reasons that I shared, but them's my stories.
That's awesome. All right, well, wrapping up the interview, I have a couple more questions.
Yeah.
I'm a aspiring actor, and so what advice do you have for aspiring actors or writers, creatives, just from your experiences?
Acknowledge the privileges that you have, accept it, and be as strong of an ally for others, but create your own stories. Like that is a big one, and recognize your value and worth. The sooner the better. Like we can work from a place of scarcity, and thereby just saying yes to someone seeing you and accepting you, and affirming you, and you're like, yes, I'll take that thing for X amount of dollars. And I think in the beginning of your career, I think it's good to do certain things and just to do it, because sometimes people might not work for a couple of years, and then your instrument is rusty. And I think getting an opportunity to work on things early in your career is good, and recognize your gut, trust your gut of what's off. And I'm referring to artistically, something's off. Learn how to talk about it with a director, with a writer, with other actors, and then also just the types of people that are out there. There are not very good people out there in the arts, whether it's theater or TV or film, and just trusting your gut. If there's a flag that's coming up and you need to step away or call someone out on something, and the shame that can come up it's sometimes it's a part of the arts, and I don't like that. And I always encourage people, you shouldn't feel shame. And if someone's shaming you, you need to like figure out a way of how to stand up for yourself. The way you would stand up for someone else, you learn how to stand up for yourself. And that's why I think therapy is good, because you have someone who's not connected to your friendships. not connected to your job, your community, and you can talk freely about it. It's not just like there's to fix your problems or anything like that. It's just so you can have someone that you can talk to. And sometimes people have mentors, sometimes a family, sometimes, and that's great, but not everyone does. And I still think it's good to have someone outside of that, so you can figure it out and they can give you a perspective on it. And just, the only way you're going to learn is by failing. Accept that you're going to fail a lot. What is it? There's a Beckett quote of like, fail, then fail better, and then fail again. Like, it's just like, just fail better. You learn from what worked and what didn't work, and then just go again. It's not going to happen like this. For some people it does. And it's like, I know for me, I just go through it. That's not fair. But it's like, no, like, that's just the way it goes. And there are people who just are writing, are acting a lot, are in classes, and they're just already get that instrument going, and accept what you can bring to the table. Don't always try to be like other people. Be inspired by them, but figure out who your voice is as a creative, as an artist.
Oh, awesome. Just to finish, I want to give you a little bit of a platform. Are there any projects that you're working on currently that are upcoming, or that your colleagues might be working on, that you want to highlight?
Oh, damn. Teatro Vista in Chicago, the company that I was with for almost 10 years, they just got two new co-artistic directors, Lorena Diaz and Wendy Mateo. They're also best friends, and they're part of a duo, Venezuelan. One's Dominican, one's Venezuelan. And they're hilarious, two of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. And now they're running Teatro Vista, and they're really challenging what it means to be a theater company. So there's a lot of digital work they're creating, like a podcast series, a digital play, and they're just really are exploring accessibility also, because theater can be very elitist and classist, and they are doing something that is like kind of is unheard of. And so I'm glad the company of ensemble members and the board agreed to get them in there to lead the company in this next leg of the next transition. And so I'm just rooting for what's going on over there, and I just want to send as much support to them. What else? No, I mean, I mentioned our pilot, the Lacona Legacy, that just got accepted to the Latinx Reading Initiative. So we got paired up with a mentor, and we got some good feedback, and we're gonna do some rewrites. But we'll see if something goes further than that. And then I have my next solo play, Finding Pancho, which I got commissioned from a theater in Washington, D.C. So that's a big one. Anything Brian Quijada is creating, I would easily say look for him. And he is a cooler person than I ever be. He has more coolness in his pinky than I do. I mean, he's a musician. He's a looper. He can freestyle. He's just a very dynamic storyteller and creative. So look for him online, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And if you ever meet him, you'll be like, oh, I just want to be a fan and follow you everywhere. And I've known him since he was, I don't know, 12 years old. His brother Marvin, who's an amazing mime and creative. I worked with him on Short Eyes by Miguel Piñero in Chicago, and so I got to see Brian as a wee pup, and now he's just blowing up. So that's what I would say. And I would say the way people will watch Shakespeare so many times in their lives and not like a show, but then they go again to see another production of it, or they don't like 10 of them and they still go to another one. I just encourage everyone, if you see something written by a Latinx artist and it's not to your liking, watch their next thing. Don't make that one experience go, I'm never going to watch Latinx stories or plays or this. No, like, watch their canon of work. Like, that's what interests me. And I tell people sometimes, we're like, I don't want you to see it because I don't think it's good. And I'm like, I don't care if it's good. Like, I'm going to see your next thing. It drives me crazy. Like I get why people are perfectionists that way, or time is money, but Shakespeare gets a lot of leeway, and I love Shakespeare. I love, that's what got me into theater. And I didn't say that earlier, but that's when I started acting. Was doing was first a musical, and then I did Shakespeare, and I just was like, oh my god. And I taught. I was a teaching artist in Washington Heights with the People's Theater Project, Mina Lora and Bob Braswell, where I was using Shakespeare to work with ESL students so they can learn English, which is like, that's crazy. But I think even people who speak English as a first language have a hard time with Shakespeare. And if they're able to like wrap their mouths around certain words and understand it, contemporary English is so much easier. And actually Spanish and Shakespeare writing they're pretty similar. The flow is beautiful. So I love Shakespeare, but I'm also the first one to be like, forget that guy. Like, I want us full seasons of Black playwrights, of Latinx playwrights, and let's just commit to it and see what happens. Because we don't know who's going to be exposed to it and go, oh, I want to do that. And you just don't know. We keep putting, centering the white narrative as the norm, as the neutral, then we're just going to keep perpetuating the same thing going forward. So that's what I would tell people, is like, just keep watching more. Like, just do it. Like, trust me. Like, it's just, it will open up the palette and your mind and your point of view of things. And the same thing with the LGBTQIA plus work.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for answering my questions.
No problem, man.